Good evening. My name is Diane Norland. I am a member of the St. Peter Area League of Women Voters and will be your moderator at this candidate forum for Minnesota House Districts 22A and 22B. Assisting me is Joan Easton, also a St. Peter Area League member. This forum is being presented by the St. Peter Area League of Women Voters with co-sponsor St. Peter Chamber of Commerce. The League of Women Voters is a local, state, and national nonpartisan volunteer group. The League encourages informed and active participation of citizens in government, and it influences public policy through education and advocacy. It does not support candidates or political parties. Our event tonight is designed to allow the candidates an opportunity to express their views on issues important to members of the public. This forum is being recorded in its entirety without an audience on National Voter Registration Day, September 17th, in the Governor's Room at the St. Peter Community Center. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or edited clips of candidate forums may not be used for partisan political purposes. I will ask questions tonight submitted by the public to the League via email prior to this evening. League question facilitators screen all questions and may rephrase, combine, or eliminate questions to avoid duplication. We will not ask questions that are irrelevant to the office or that are designed to make a statement rather than solicit information. Questions that are hostile, embarrassing, inappropriate, or of a personal nature will not be asked. As forum moderator, I have the final responsibility as to which questions will be asked. All candidates listed by the Minnesota Secretary of State's office have been invited to participate. 2 of the candidates were unable to attend due to other commitments this evening. They were offered the opportunity to submit written opening and closing statements, but did not submit statements to us. With us tonight are Marissa Ullman, a candidate for House District 22A, and Sarah Nett Torgrimsson, candidate for House District 22B. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes for opening statements. Then, on a rotating basis, as generated by a coin flipping app, candidates will be asked questions. They will each have 2 minutes to answer, except for the lightning round questions that require only a yes or no answer. At the end of the forum, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make closing statements. Timers will hold up a yellow sign when 30 seconds are left, and a stop sign when time is up. Candidates may finish their sentences. Our timers this evening are Harriet Mason and Victoria Steinhaus, both members of the St. Peter Area League, and you have seen them. We have asked each candidate to be specific in their opening statements as to the reasons they are running for office and what unique qualities, skills, experience, or expertise they would bring to the job. We will start opening statements with House 22A candidate Marissa Ullman, followed by House 22B candidate Sarah Nett Torgrimsson. Marissa?
Hi, it's Marissa Ullman, but that's fine. My grandmother's sister couldn't say it.
Thank you.
I'm a 5th-generation farmer in Watonwan County. My mother still lives on the home place. My husband and I live on his family's home place. We farm just under 200 acres. We raise livestock, and we own a feed mill. And for those of you who live in a city, a feed mill has nothing to do with a puppy mill. We simply make feed for livestock. My education is political science, philosophy, and economics. I spent most of my working life in human resources and some in accounting. The reason I'm running for office is because of this rural and metro divide. And it seems that there is some sort of barrier in either language or feelings where the voices in rural Minnesota aren't getting heard. And so in order to communicate what that difference is to those in the metro, I thought I would run and help them out a little bit. To give you an idea of how rural my district is, I have 29 zip codes in my district. So some of you, I know that you had Luke here earlier, he has 3. I also have 20 small towns or villages, the largest being Fairmont of 10,000 people, the next largest being Blue Earth at about 3,200. And so it is a large area and mostly rural. Thank you.
Marissa, say your name again.
It's Marisa, like Lisa. Marisa, like Lisa,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. As Diane said, my name is Sarah Nutt Torgrimson. I am running in District 22B. I was born and raised in rural North Dakota, up near the Canadian border. I come from a farm family myself. My dad is still up there farming, and I was raised during the farm crisis. My parents did everything they could to support the community, to support their kids, to make sure that kids in rural districts got a good education. In addition to farming, my dad was also a teacher and a coach and a bus driver and the night manager of Barlow's grocery store, while my mom served as a room mother and a volunteer librarian, and when I was 11, ran for the school board. She unseated a long-term incumbent in a surprise landslide. And it was at that moment that I realized that if you want to make change, you have to stand up and take action. I attended college at MSU in Mankato. I studied women and gender studies and public administration. Currently, my husband and I have a small farm, much smaller than Marisa's. We have 74 acres that we hay, and I grow specialty cut flowers. In addition, I own a small flower shop here in St. Peter, and we have 1 child in the Mankato School District. When I was growing up, I went to a school district in a class of 42. We had barely over 400 students in the district. And when I look around at rural districts such as St. Clair, which is a part of my district, or Cleveland, and I see the way those schools are struggling, I am reminded of the school district that I was raised in. I am reminded of the struggles that I saw in the 1980s and the early 90s growing up there. And I think that it is time to make sure that people at the Capitol are aware of those struggles, that the voices, as Marisa said, are heard at the Capitol, and that rural Minnesota has fair representation at the Capitol. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, we will begin our questions. And we will start, Marisa, you will be the first one to answer. Both 22A and 22B are geographically large with populations concentrated in both small cities and towns. For example, 22A goes to the Iowa border. 22B contains the exurb Belle Plaine. If elected, how would you be available for and reach out to the constituents in your district? Marisa.
Well, the summer has been a tour of small towns, whether it being parades or city councils or county commissioner meetings. My district would encompass most of 4 counties, well, most of 3 and part of 4 counties. And going to those commissioner meetings and going to those city council meetings are a big step in that. I've been able to do most of that already this summer, and so given a full year, I don't see that that would be a problem. One of the things about small towns is that, for instance, I was city clerk in the town of Louisville, which is about 350 people. They don't put their minutes online like many people who have televised or recorded city council meetings. You actually have to go to the meetings or find someone who has the minutes in order to find out what's going on in those towns. That, a little off subject, but that is how I found out that my opponent had told the Louisville City Council that they should hire a lobbyist to help them with their water treatment problem. Now, this is a town of 350 people. It wasn't advertised that this is something that he told them at the Capitol. He promised he would work for them, but couldn't guarantee it. And so, thank goodness they did not hire a lobbyist, because they would have been lobbying him, their advocate, their elected official, to help them in that sort of situation. And we've got that in many, many, many areas. We've got that in Vernon Center. When you have 20 plus towns in your district, with most of that infrastructure being 50 to 70 years old, these conditions keep coming up. And asking a town of those sizes to be able to support and revitalize their water treatment plants is near to impossible.
Sarah?
Touring Minnesota has been fun this summer, I must say that. City council meetings are important, county commission meetings are important, but in my experience sitting on planning and zoning commissions in 2 states, you don't get everybody to those meetings. So while that is an important first step, building relationships with people in the community is an important part of that. I tend to build relationships with teachers. I have a soft spot in my heart for educators, and they tend to know what's happening in the small towns. So for me, I think it's important when communicating to communicate through multiple mediums, through email and through written letters, through holding forums for people to come talk to you, holding town halls, making sure that they have a way that they can have direct access to you. It is important to talk to the elected officials and appointed officials in a town. It is also important to talk to the everyday people. It is fascinating what you find out when you go out into these small towns and have conversations. For example, I recently found out the St. Clair City Council is planning on tearing up their Main Street to replace repair work that was done 20 years ago and did not last the way it was supposed to. And they don't know how the town's going to pay for it. I found out from talking to teachers that Cleveland is looking at having to pass a $500,000 levy to continue operations for their school district because they simply don't have the funding that they need in that small rural school district. It's important to connect with people where they're at. Sometimes that means going out and sitting in a local restaurant and just having conversations with the people that walk through the door, finding out what they think, what their experiences are, and what they need you to pay attention to in their district.
Next question, question 2. Climate change is one of the environmental issues impacting agriculture and agricultural practices. How can the legislature collaborate with farmers to adapt to the changing climate? What other ways would you address climate change issues in your district? And we will start with Sarah.
Climate change is certainly a challenge when you are performing any sort of agricultural work. I know on our farm this summer we got 9 inches of rain in one day, and it completely wiped out our dahlia field. For cut flowers, dahlias are my main product, and when we lost it, we lost a huge investment. It is important that farmers understand that the legislature, that government is not trying to tell them necessarily how to do their job, and also that the legislature is listening to farmers, because we need to make transitions to more sustainable practices, whether that's no-till farming or restoring natural prairie land. We also need to support our farmers as they make those transitions. So we can't simply mandate something and not provide funding and education along with that mandate to ensure that our farmers are able to make transitions while still being able to support their families. In addition to that, I think investment in green agriculture or green technology, especially in our rural areas, is going to be of huge importance. I know that when it comes to installing solar, the best place to put solar is on a roof, and we need to make sure that our farmers know that we know that, because taking up arable land for solar panels is not the best use of our land. And yes, they need to be supported. We need to do work on clean water. We need to encourage cover cropping so that we don't lose that topsoil every winter when the wind blows. We need to make it possible and affordable for our farmers to do that. So that requires investments, that requires grants, that requires financial support for our agriculture sector.
Thank you, Sarah. Marisa?
Yeah, precision ag is a great tool that we can use. Precision ag helps you decide how much of what kind of fertilizer, what kind of nutrients your land needs. And that's something that we do working with incorporating more so that you're not overusing a manure, you're not overusing the nitrogen, you're not having nitrates go and filter down into your water. About 4 or 5 years ago, we started working with both Mankato State University and Concordia College out of Northfield, and they were doing soil samples, and they would come to our farm every 3 to 4 weeks, depending on which college it was. And the farmer next to us was thinking, well, what's going on? What are all these people doing? And so he finally said, well, can you test my land too? And he had been doing what we would call conventional farming, but he had been doing it this way for so long that the nutritional value of his land was basically the equivalent of styrofoam. And so for the first time ever, my husband's lived on that farm place his whole life, they introduced a cover crop. Not because it was good for the environment, but because it was good for their field. And so just because something is green or environmentally friendly doesn't also mean that it's not good for your land, good for your field. Cover crops, good grief, no-till. And when you ask people how come they're doing all of their tilling in the fall, most of the time they say, well, they don't like the look of it through the winter, that it doesn't look neat, it doesn't look pretty. And we think, oh, good grief, you went across that field how many times? How much diesel did you spend just doing that when you've got to come right back in the spring and start to plant? And of course you need to plow before that. Crop rotation is an important part of it. We do animal grazing. We raise goats, dairy goats, and we often let our neighbor sheep graze on our lands, and that's an integral part of the crop rotation and nitrogen cycle.
Marisa. The next question is the lightning round, so be ready. And we will start with, start with Marisa. Lightning round. You get to answer yes or no. Should owners of prime agricultural land be prohibited from converting their land to solar energy production? Yes or no?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Question number 4, and we will start with Marisa. Question number 4. Housing availability and communication access consistently show up as pressing priorities for voters. What specific needs do you see in your district? If elected, what legislation would you support to address these needs? And we will start with Marisa.
Well, we always talk about rural broadband. We've talked about rural broadband, for 10, 15 years now. I'm in districts, towns in my district that don't have cell phone coverage. And so you might think that that's a little strange, but the whole town of LaSalle, it's only about 80, 85 people, but nobody can use their cell phone in the town. So of course we need to have rural broadband, but we need to go back and make sure that all of our state has cell phone service. And I'm sorry, the other, what would I do as a legislature?
Yes, if elected, what legislation would you support to address these needs?
Well, we need to treat these like we treated utilities. And we need to make sure that it is the same as when they were putting in electricity, in the 40s and 50s, that these need to go to all of our homes, all of our streets, all of our access. And so to add rural broadband and cell phone coverage where many people aren't having landlines anymore, that's got to be part of legislation.
Sarah?
I 100% Agree with what Marisa said. Broadband access should be a utility. You cannot live anymore without having access to the internet. And the dead spots as you travel through rural parts of the state for cell phone coverage are somewhat terrifying. I have found myself wondering multiple times, what happens if there is a car accident out here and you can't get cell phone service? How are you supposed to call emergency services? How are you supposed to access the help you need? As far as housing goes, the housing crisis is so incredibly complex, but one of the things that I know is that we have to have affordable housing, and we have to have enough of it to bring young people back, to make it worthwhile to live in our rural communities. I don't know that there's a simple solution. I support public-private partnerships so long as it is not the public putting forth the money and the private entity profiting from it. I think that we need to look at innovative solutions for that. We have to do something. We have to do something. As far as the broadband and the wireless goes, we need full coverage, and we need to invest in that, and we need to invest in it as a utility, and we need to hold those companies' feet to the fire. I know that MetroNet has been trying to expand out in my district for quite some time now. I also know that I have residents in my district who had MetroNet installed over a year ago and still can't use their telephone. So we have to address the issues that are currently there as well.
Thank you. Next question, question number 5. Oh, by the way, should I repeat the question for each of you?
I don't think that's necessary.
Oh.
I just missed the last half of that one question.
Oh, okay.
I skipped
Okay.
the housing part.
Oh. Okay. Question number 5. I will try to speak louder as well. The state offers the Minnesota Care healthcare program to provide coverage to low-income families at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Should this plan be expanded to include a public option so that more low-income Minnesotans are able to purchase health insurance? Is there other legislation that would improve healthcare access for residents in your district? And we will start with Marisa.
Less than 50% employers in my district offer health insurance. And so there obviously needs to be another option besides just waiting around until you're eligible for Medicare. My opponent would tell me that there is no place for government in healthcare. And so what that meant for me before Minnesota Care, because we do have a small business, and that is where we get our health care. It meant that I wouldn't have health care because I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia at the age of 36, and so that is a pre-existing condition. Yes, we need a public option. Private industry works great until they don't cover it, until they don't work, until it's not an option. And in that case, we absolutely need to have a government option. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Question number 6.
Oh.
Oops. Okay. Yes, yes.
Thank you, Diane.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
I will say my family has been on Minnesota Care. My husband was laid off during the pandemic, and it was the best insurance we've ever had. Also, I just want to point out, because I have employees, and twice the federal poverty limit for a single person is not enough money to live and buy your own health insurance. So yes, we need a public option. I would absolutely support a public option. I would support it even more if it was a movement towards healthcare for all. Because, as Marisa said, private insurance works great until they don't cover something. And no one should have any health condition that they cannot seek treatment for because it is not covered by their insurance, and they may go bankrupt if they choose to treat a health condition. Yes, we need coverage for every single Minnesotan, and I know in rural areas with farmers, anybody who is self-employed, as I am, as my husband is, it can be a real challenge to get health coverage. So yes, Minnesota needs to expand Minnesota Care and provide that public option to all of us.
Thank you, Sarah. Question number 6, and we will begin with Marisa.
Sarah.
Yes. Okay. During the 2025 session, legislators will generate the budget for the next biennium. What are your top priorities for funding and why? Marisa.
Rural healthcare is the top funding. What has happened with a lot of our rural areas is that a large healthcare system such as Mayo Clinic or United Healthcare has come in and bought up our hospitals and slowly sold them off for parts. Thankfully, I live outside of Medelia, which has maintained their own hospital and clinic through all of this years. But down in Fairmont, Mayo Clinic just put out a notice saying that they are no longer offering OBGYN services to Fairmont, a town of 10,000 people. So when we lose our small rural healthcare systems, when they are bought up by large healthcare systems, that doesn't mean that people suddenly don't need OBGYN care. It doesn't mean that we suddenly say, oh, but we have a new podiatrist and that ought to fix it. So there's the rural healthcare. We made a lot of advantages with rural healthcare through the COVID with working with telehealth services. And again, where we came up in rural areas where it was really lacking is people don't have very good internet service. And so one of the fixes to not going into physically a doctor's office if you live 20, 30, 50 miles away doesn't work if you don't have rural broadband. The other huge necessity is childcare, and we're seeing childcare businesses go out of business. We have put a lot of regulations on them. We have probably swung the pendulum too far one way, and we need to bring it back a little bit into the middle. Nobody wants their children to go to a daycare that isn't regulated by any means. But when I'm hearing from some of these private daycare providers who offer that neighborhood support, and often within a close distance of their homes, they're dealing with situations where only much larger daycare centers are worried about, and we need to separate those regulations from the private daycare homes and the larger daycare centers.
Sarah?
I second supporting rural healthcare. It is a nightmare not to have access nearby. And again, the broadband challenge is there, the cell phone challenge is there. How do you do telehealth appointments when you can't get on the internet? Another thing that I would like to see invested in is education. Our rural school districts, especially our small ones, are struggling. They're struggling hard, and we are leaving students without the environments, tools, and support they need to get the education that is necessary for the future. We are also leaving our teachers in a lurch. They're not being paid commensurate with the responsibility that they take on, and that they are not guaranteed a retirement with dignity at this point. Childcare. Childcare has been a huge issue for as long as I can remember. My child is 12 now, so they have definitely aged out of care. However, I can remember paying more in childcare fees than I did in my mortgage. And we have one child. I can also remember hearing from the small center that our daughter went to that when the regulators came in to look at her center, that they were counting blocks rather than looking at how the children were cared for. There is excessive regulation, and while no one wants an accident to happen at childcare, we have taken it too far. The final thing I will say is we need to invest in building resilient rural communities across the board, and that means bringing healthcare in. That means having great education in our rural communities, and that means having enough childcare that our parents can work to ensure that that economy in those rural cities and towns remains strong.
Thank you. Question number 7 is lightning round, and we will start with Sarah. Lightning round. Do you support allowing regionally significant projects For example, community recreation centers and parks and trail improvements to be funded with a local sales tax? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Marisa? Okay, thank you. Okay, question number 8. According to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, a growing scarcity of workers is now recognized as one of Minnesota's most significant barriers to sustained economic growth. Do you see this in your district? What approaches do you feel are needed to increase the Minnesota workforce? Marisa?
Yes. My district has an unemployment rate of under 3%. And that varies by 0.2, 0.1% throughout the district, but it's under 3%. Now, these were numbers from May, so I don't know if they're seasonally adjusted for teachers or not, but in May, they were under 3%. When we look at economic growth in small towns, the first thing that you look at is, well, who's going to work there if there's a new business that comes in? Well, having worked in human resources for many, many years, 3% is full employment. There's nobody left to work. If you look up and down any of these small towns, for instance, before I got here, because I know very little about St. Peter, I looked at the help wanted ads for St. Peter. Good grief, there's 100 job positions opening, whether it's in nursing, whether it's in childcare, whether it's in trucking or working at the gas station. There are 100 plus positions open in St. Peter, and your unemployment rate is sitting just at 3% also. The other thing that has been a big difference, my son is 27, and I remember looking for summer jobs with him, going through the papers, going through the internet, in about 2012, 2013, and there weren't jobs. And so when people say that we don't have enough economic growth, that was just 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. There were not job openings for my son to have. Now we've got teen unemployment that's higher than it has ever been in our state. And so we have literally run out of people. If you are looking to open a business, there is nobody to work. And so it's a huge problem. Yes.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yes, employment is pretty much at full, and I can say that as an employer, it is very difficult to find people to work. In rural towns, I think another challenge is that when you're talking about small local businesses, you're not able to pay $25 or $26 an hour. So it's hard to find full-time workers that are working at a wage that isn't livable for them. That's another challenge that we're facing. I know that for me to compete here in St. Peter, I have to pay wages that are at least what Quick Trip is at, and I am not a huge corporation. That is hard for small businesses to do, especially when you take into account employment taxes and other expenses that go with having employees. As far as people getting jobs, another issue I've seen is that everybody wants to work a 9-to-5 job, but not all jobs are 9-to-5 jobs. Some jobs are swing shift jobs. Some jobs are overnight jobs. And those tend to be harder to fill, at least in my district. I don't know how you solve that problem without bringing in new people. I don't know how you bring new people in without making sure that they have housing and broadband. So we have kind of a chicken or an egg situation. And the question is, what problems do we solve first so that we can bring new employees in?
Thank you, Sarah. Question number 9. With respect to education, what should be the legislature's role, if any, in determining school curriculum and what is taught in classrooms throughout the state? We'll start with Sarah.
I believe that it is the job of the legislature to set standards for what our children should be learning, standards that no school district should be allowed to fall below. And from there on, as long as those schools are reaching those basic standards where our children are learning history and math and civics and the science that they need to go out into the world and be successful, I don't believe that the legislature should be involved in curriculum at all. I believe that that is a decision best made by local school boards based on the character of the town.
Thank you, Sarah. Marisa?
There's been some recent studies done by the Annie E. Casey Foundation about the lowering of test scores in Minnesota. And part of that we know is a rebound from COVID. And some to be expected, but we have fallen significantly in national rankings over the last 10 years. And not all of that is due to COVID. But there are some definite problems. Now, I know the legislature passed the READ Act, and we'll see how that goes. Give it a couple of minutes, and hopefully that kind of thing will work. But where we're missing really in our schools are vocational and technical training. There is not post-secondary education anywhere in my district anymore. There was a presentation college in Fairmont. They left in 2021. There is no place to get certified nursing assistant. There is no place to get a dental hygienist. When my husband was in high school, he got on a bus every morning and went to Hanska Vocational College, where they learned different things about mechanical, a little engineering, a little electrical work, a little plumbing, a little agricultural work. By the time I came up through that same high school, that program had disappeared. And that was the 80s. We know what happened in the 80s. But that doesn't mean that the need for that program is gone. This gives kids an opportunity to find out, is this something I'm good at? Is this something I could go to? Is this something I could enjoy? So that they could have an idea, I could go to a technical school to do this, or whoa, this is not the area for me. I think those are programs that we're really missing. When I mentioned this at the last forum, my opponent said, well, we teach welding in Fairmont School. Hold on, there is a welding program at Fairmont School, and I said, that's great, but there's another 19 schools in the district that don't have that program. And so you're obviously saying that there's a need, and it's not being met.
Okay, thank you. Question number 10. The Pew Research Center published gun death data for 2021, the most recent year in which the complete data is available. A total of 572 gun-related deaths occurred in Minnesota, of which 278 were in Greater Minnesota. Suicides account for 391 of these deaths. What type of legislation do you believe would help mitigate this public health crisis and make our communities safer? And we will start with Marisa.
Safe storage laws, red flag laws. Their red flag laws were enacted. They need to be actually regulated also. My husband and I are gun owners. We raise livestock. It would be irresponsible of us to not have a gun. But the style of gun that we have is what's important. My husband's a pretty good shot. If he needs to put down an animal, he only needs to use one bullet. He does not need something with 30 or 50 bullets in a minute. There needs to be a difference between what is a socially appropriate weapon and what is something that is just purely sport for violence. We need to eliminate straw purchases. So we do have some regulations of background checks in this state. Thank goodness. But that doesn't prohibit somebody from taking a gun and selling it to somebody else. It does not make sure that if that gun is stolen, that they have to report it stolen. We can trace guns if we want to. People say that people don't kill people. We all know it's the guns that kill people. Nobody ever went absolutely crazy with a whittling knife and took out a school. We need to have the assault ban back, the assault gun weapon ban back.
Sarah?
Like Marisa, we have a farm. For us, it's not for taking down animals, it's more for the coyotes that tend to gather in our wetlands. We own firearms. They are stored safely. Safe storage laws are a huge part of that. The assault weapon ban needs to come back. I remember when it was there, and things have changed considerably since the assault weapon ban went away. Straw purchases, we definitely need to make sure that nobody is purchasing a firearm for anyone who should not have one and who is prohibited by law. Red flag laws are hugely important. If somebody is unwell mentally, regardless of the cause of it, they should not be carrying a firearm. We need to ensure that ammunition purchases are logical and reasonable. It is one thing to go in and buy one box of 22s for a 22 rimfire. It is another thing to go in and buy 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and should never be tolerated. Private purchases should not be allowed. We need licensed gun dealers. We need to be able to trace those firearms. So if they are used in a crime, we can find out who the owner is. If a gun is stolen, it absolutely should be reported. And this is something that tends to be fairly controversial in my house, but I believe that firearm owners like ourselves should have to carry insurance as firearm owners. We should have to prove that we are going to be responsible, and it should cost us money to do so.
Thank you, Sarah. Question number 11 is the lightning round. Should Election Day be a state holiday? Yes or no? Marisa?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. They are lightning, aren't they? Rounds. Question number 12. And this will be the last question, and then we will go to our closing statements. Question number 12. Tonight we've asked you about a number of issues facing the state. Is there something we missed that you know is important to residents of your district and will be a priority if you are elected? Sarah, we'll start with you.
There are many things I could expand upon that we've talked about tonight. I will say I often talk when I'm out in my district about building resilient rural communities. And to me, what that means is having good paying jobs in a community. It means having a diverse local economy, because when we have local businesses, every local business keeps about 68 cents of every dollar you spend in that business in the community, whereas our big box stores tend to keep about 43 cents of every dollar. So our local businesses really reinvest in a way that big box stores don't. I am someone who talks TIFs a lot, tax incentivized financing. And TIFs were originally established in order to revitalize our downtown districts in our small towns. And the way I saw them being used when I was on planning and zoning commissions was to fund the development done by private equity firms, done by wealthy patrons that weren't reinvesting. We need to reassess that. We need to have programs that actually do revitalize our small towns and keep people coming back. Another thing that I've noticed is transportation in rural districts. The ability, especially for our elderly, to get the places they need to be, whether it's the doctor or the grocery store, is sorely lacking in Minnesota. As they told me down in St. Clair, back in 1883, they had 4 stagecoaches a day that went between St. Clair and Mankato, and now you can't even get an Uber out there. So it's important that we look at those necessities as well.
Marisa?
Equal Rights Amendment, ERA. Women thought that we had rights in this country until the fall of Roe, and then we realized we don't have rights, we had privileges. And so when I talk to Republicans who say, well, wait, of course it's illegal to discriminate against women. Well, tell that to my banker who would prefer to talk to my husband. Now that's just one little inconvenience for me that we can work around. But until women's rights are in our Constitution, we know that they are just simply privileges given to us that can be taken away with any court, any Supreme Court hearing. Other than that, of course, transportation is a huge thing. I've got many towns in my district that are 1,000 people that don't have a grocery store. We have elderly people living in these places, and so I'm told, well, you can get groceries at the gas station. They don't really have a very good selection of fruits and vegetables, and they certainly don't have a pharmacy. And so as our rural voters, our rural citizens are getting older, their eyesight maybe isn't so good, their ability to drive is fading. We certainly don't have a bus service. And so one thing that is incredibly frustrating for someone who lives in a rural district is to hear that maybe we should look at a high-speed train from Minneapolis to Duluth, or a high-speed train from Minneapolis to Rochester. And I'm thinking, we've got most of my district that has got to travel 30 miles plus round trip to get to a grocery store. And we're talking about high-speed rail. Where, why, when there is a bus service to those areas? When my mother was growing up in Medelia, she could get on the bus also in Medelia, go to Mankato for the afternoon shopping, get a bus ride home. When I was growing up, I would take the bus to see my aunt in Sioux Falls. Could come right back. The transportation is going to be a huge problem. Thank you.
We will now have the candidates' closing statements, up to 2 minutes each, and starting with Marisa.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. We don't have an organization like this in my district, and so it's a real thrill to be able to come here. Maybe you could get an organization like this down in my district. That would be fun. So I do want to thank the League of Women Voters, and I do want to thank the St. Peter Chamber of Commerce, because I am way out of this district. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people and to have a forum where people can actually hear what it is that you think, because you can only get so much out in a blurb or on your website. And speaking of websites, my website is almondforhouse.org if anyone has any other information that they'd like to see. Again, my name is Marisa Allman, like Lisa, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Sarah?
I too want to extend my gratitude to the League of Women Voters. I have a toe in this town because we own a business here, but I am deeply grateful that this was possible. I have not had the opportunity to have a candidate forum like this to simply speak and answer questions from community, so thank you. We have a lot of work to do in our rural areas. I have seen a slow-rolling farm crisis for a while. I am deeply concerned, especially about our small family farmers who are farming under 300 acres, like Marisa, like myself. Our education depends on agriculture. Our downtowns depend on agriculture. And if we don't take care of our farmers, I know that all falls apart. I have witnessed it where I grew up, and I know what comes after that. Because then you start losing people, and then you start losing towns, and pretty soon, there's not much left. I don't want to see that happen to Minnesota. North Dakota is my home of chance, and I am grateful for the things that I learned growing up there, but Minnesota is my home of choice because I see hope and I see opportunity here. I hope that voters will see the same things that I do and will elect me to the state legislature so we can move some of those things forward. And I look forward to working with Marisa when I'm up there. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our forum. If we did not get to your question, please contact the candidates directly. Contact information is available at the Minnesota Secretary of State's website under Elections and Voting, Candidate Filings. I want to thank our candidates for participating this evening. Thanks also goes to our co-host, the St. Peter Chamber of Commerce, the City of St. Peter, and fellow League volunteers. To our viewers of this recording, thank you for watching. For more information about voting and the candidates for House Districts 22A and 22B, please visit www.vote411.org. And remember to vote. The election will be held on November 5th, and early voting starts on September 20th. Thank you.